Okay, thanks everyone for joining. Today's webinar is about myths about candidate experience and how to everyone for joining. My name is Courtney here. I'm a senior talent solutions expert here at Outmatch. And I've got Chelsea with me.
Hi everyone, my name is Chelsea Sharon. I'm also a talent solutions expert at Outmatch.
And so our role here at Outmatch is really to work with clients. We both have backgrounds in industrial organizational psychology, and we really live and breathe assessments in a lot of ways. We do both talent management as well as development work for a variety of clients in different industries. And you get a lot of feedback, I think, from clients about candidate experience, and we're hearing a lot about how important it is. So really thought today would be a good chance to share some of those learnings with you all. And if you have questions throughout, feel free to reach out to us through the webinar. So you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen, you have an opportunity to communicate with us. So you can actually ask questions or even chat in. I know some folks already have said, hey, we can't hear anything. So we're trying to respond to that and keep on top of it. So again, throughout the webinar, feel free to communicate with us, and we'll be sure to get back to you. Additionally, you can always ask for a copy of this webinar if you'll just email us, and we'll be happy to share that with you. It will be posted on our website as well. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and get started. So Chelsea, turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Courtney. Well, welcome again. Courtney and I are very excited to share with you our insights into this topic. It's actually something we're really passionate about. I think that the candidate experience often gets overlooked when you're looking at a broad talent strategy. We agonize making the selection process just right for the recruiters and for the hiring managers. We try to maximize the likelihood of finding that perfect candidate. But what impact does that have on the candidate himself? I know we've all been candidates applying for a job before, so I'm sure you can all recollect a good experience you may have had as well as a bad experience, one that left you with a bad taste in your mouth about not only the job, but also the company. So today, we hope to provide some insights into not only the candidate experience basics, but also some myths around the candidate experience, as well as get into some steps on how to improve the overall process. So let's start with the basics. What do we even mean when we say candidate experience? It may seem simple or self-evident, but really surprisingly, a lot of people use this term to refer to various parts of the selection process, but we take a more holistic perspective. One of the best definitions of candidate experience comes from one of our partners, Smart Recruiters, who state, the candidate experience starts with the first communication between a company and a candidate regarding a possible job opportunity. It involves the overall evaluation of the candidate's treatment from the beginning to the end. And when we say the end, we mean all the way through the onboarding process, really. And the problem, what's important here again is the beginning to the end. That means every step, every detail, every thought, every conversation is going to have an impact on your candidate. It's really high touch and a one-on-one experience, very much like marketing itself. The problem is that the state of the candidate experience really isn't good.
Yeah, and thanks, Chelsea. So when we talk about why a candidate experience isn't good, what we're really talking about is things like the communication during the recruitment process, how candidates actually are told to prepare for interviews, and furthermore, even those first few days on the job and that onboarding experience. So I think that employers often forget that what it's really like to be a candidate. You know, you're in your job, you get really comfortable, and you don't always realize those little things that make a huge impact and how that may carry over into being a new employee. So for example, one of the things that employers often forget about is to share that really important realistic job preview information, setting expectations for what it's like to do a certain job, and even what some of the cultural norms are. Those are things you can really share in the process, and oftentimes I think companies leave out. We also find that many times things like logistics are often overlooked. So we found that 32% of candidates actually reported they didn't receive any information to help them prepare for an interview. And this can become a really big deal because it really leaves the candidate with a sense of feeling inadequately prepared and unable to put their best foot forward. If you don't know what you're walking into, it's really hard to prepare. And then finally, it's important to remember that the candidate experience continues post-offer. So we find that oftentimes new hires don't even get a call from their hiring manager or even get socialized with other peers and other team members. And those are things that really do impact their experience long term. You know, when you're starting a job, or even actually once you get the offer, oftentimes there's all this hype and excitement. But then to start your first day of work and suddenly feel like you're just another person, another employee number, really doesn't leave in a good impression. And that's really why candidate experience matters so much, and it should be continued forward. So 47%, this is an important number because we actually find that 40% of applicants have no previous relationship whatsoever with the company before applying for a job. And we want to focus on candidate experience because candidate experience really equals brand experience. When candidates are applying, sometimes they may know things about companies, but oftentimes that's their first impression. And so it's really important that you make that first exposure, that first impression, a good one. Regardless of your business or market, you know, we know that customers are important, and it's important to all levels of companies. So a bad interaction is really going to break the chances of a further interaction or a future one. So think about brand and candidate experience as really one and the same. Think about it as your company really putting itself out there and showing the quality and the value they provide and how candidates can really sort of join that organization and be part of that team in a positive way.
That's great. So I also wanted to deep dive into a little bit about why the more holistic approach to a candidate experience is so important. So every single step of that candidate experience process can make an impact not only on that particular candidate, but on your brand and your organization. So not to make recruiters sad, but hiring managers have actually a lot more influence on the candidate than recruiters. And that's because the candidate knows that that's the individual they're going to be reporting to. So it's really important that not only the recruiters have a good face and a good relationship with the candidate, but that the hiring managers do as well and try to provide a positive experience. However, there are some things that can help the recruiters really make a good impact on those candidates. Specifically, recruiters who exhibit warmth and knowledge about the job are going to help generate a more positive experience for the candidates. Another thing that's important is trying to make that positive influence right off the bat. So we really have about 7 seconds when your first impressions are made, and those impressions are what sticks with people. So candidates who have a positive interaction up front with a recruiter and then go on to have a positive experience with their hiring managers are going to have a better overall experience and are going to be more likely to be receptive to offers. Another thing that's important as part of the candidate experience is to make sure that the selection process and any assessments or tests are job relevant. And again, as to highlighting Courtney's point about setting expectations, when you ensure that any assessments or any steps in the process are explained and applicable, you're going to get positive reactions to questions, tests, and screens. Next, let's talk a little bit about delays in the recruitment process. I don't know about you, but I certainly have been in the position where I've applied for a role and just waited and waited and waited about what comes next, what am I supposed to be doing, am I going to come in for a phone interview, am I going to come in for an interview or get a phone screen, things like that. That has a huge negative impact on the candidate experience, and I don't need to preach to the choir. I think we all feel that. So anything you can do to minimize any delays in the recruitment process will really help that candidate experience. And finally, applicant attitudes and behaviors are influenced by the presence or absence of detailed next steps and what will be required of them. So really related to that point we just talked about. Make sure your process is streamlined and efficient and that expectations about what's next in the process are communicated.
Great. Thanks, Chelsea. So now that we've talked a little bit about why candidate experience is so critical, I want to walk you through a few common myths about the candidate experience and what you can do about it to really make a difference. So first myth that we often hear is candidate experience does not have a long-term impact on the organization. So what we found is that actually candidate experience matters a lot to your brand. If you think about the impact on the company reputation, candidates share their experience. In the world of social media, people talk. People talk a lot, and it's online for everyone to see. And what we found is actually 19% of candidates post regardless. So 19% of the people that are going through your process are most likely going to be sharing their experience on social media. Of those, 32% are sharing bad experiences, and 50% of those with a positive experience are sharing those positive experiences. So good or bad, it's getting put out there. So wouldn't you rather make sure it's a good one? Additionally, we find that word of mouth or referrals. When people are at an organization, those who are having a positive experience or even had a positive experience during the candidate process are actually more likely, 61% are likely to encourage others to apply. Whereas 27% of those with a negative experience would actively discourage people from applying. So people that, we think about this as almost detractors to your brand. So if you think about things like a net promoter score, it's great all the people that are out there promoting you, but that 27% is working against you. So really, you've only got 40 or so, really less than that, percent of people who are actually out there pushing your brand, which isn't really enough. You really want to be sure that it's even a higher percentage of people really promoting your brand and minimize those that are going to detract from it. And then the last point to think about with your brand is customer loyalty. So candidates are customers too, and we know that 40% of those who have a positive experience are actually more likely to buy from your organization, whereas 30% would actually buy less. So some of you may not have a product necessarily to sell, but there's still something that you are probably offering, whether it's a value, a service, what have you. And it's important that candidate experience still is impacted, or how that person's experience is really will impact your bottom line at the end of the day. So it's important to recognize that this is sort of a lot of these things touch each other and can really impact and influence the other. Additionally, we want to talk about why candidate experience matters to your company. So recruiters often refer to the impact or the offer conversion ratio, which is really the offers accepted over total offers made. And the reason that we look at this is because it's important to understand the sort of number of offers you're making and then how many are actually being accepted. So what that kind of percentage to close, if you will, is a really important metric to look at because it starts to give you a sense of you're getting people in the door, but are you making the sell? Are they actually starting? And so it's a good thing to really look at and consider the things that impact it. So candidate experience can really persuade someone to join a company. So even when compensation isn't as competitive, we find that really positive candidate experience, the culture that people think that they're signing up for, the opportunities, the challenges, those all make a huge impact and can really sell someone on the company. Poor candidate experience, on the other hand, can lead to a few different things. You can get lower offer acceptance. So now you're putting in all this time and effort to get people in the door, only to have them not accept the offer because perhaps they were in process with someone else who had an awesome candidate experience, and so you've lost them. It can also lead to an increased time to fill. So if you think about how long it takes you to fill a role, if you have a poor candidate experience, you have people who are probably starting the process, but then you're dropping out or not a fit. You get to the end and they don't fill that final review. Those are things that can actually also impact the time.
All right, so the second myth we're going to be debunking today is the myth that the selection process for high volume roles, or really for any role, can't be personal. Maybe you're getting hundreds of applicants for a single open position. I know I've been there, and you're having to mine your way through endless resumes, trying to efficiently discern the qualified candidates from the unqualified candidates, and you're thinking, how in the world can I ever treat these people like people instead of just numbers or names on a resume? I feel yes, I've been there, but the companies that candidates love applying for have figured out that business can be personal. Companies find unique ways to make candidates feel appreciated during the selection process. And that personal touch can make a candidate feel really appreciated and valued, and that can go a long way. We actually find that some candidates will choose a company because of the candidate experience, even when compensation is higher with another company or another offer. So let's look at some examples of how some companies are able to reel in those candidates and convert them to new hires using personal touches. So example one is a global management consulting firm located in Dallas. And what they do is when they extend an offer to a candidate, they provide personalized gift baskets that not only reflect their regional office environment, but also reflect some of the individualities of that candidate as a person. They also fly in the candidate and a guest for a cultivation weekend to enjoy the city and better learn the office culture. So not only is this candidate getting treated really well, and they're getting treated like an individual, and they're getting to know, hey, here's where I'm going to be working. Here's the people I'm going to be working with. And it really makes them feel appreciated and valued before they get in the door for their first day. Another example is that Google sends their offer letters on Chromebooks, which Courtney and I certainly think is a neat touch. And so here what you can do is not only make your new hire feel appreciated when you're extending that offer, but you can personalize those computers, or you can personalize that message that that candidate's getting when they open up that computer. Although I do realize that not every company can afford to just send out Chromebooks to everyone that they're extending offers to. That would be nice. However, if you can find ways that not only make the candidate feel appreciated and valued, but reflect your brand, it can really help set you apart from other companies out there. Another thing I kind of wanted to highlight here is while these examples are more geared towards candidates who are being extended an offer, there are ways that you can make all candidates feel more appreciated throughout the hiring or throughout the selection process. So it's important not only to focus on those individuals that you're going to extend an offer to, but also to those that you're not. One way you can do this is to just simply get to know your candidates. Start relationship building with those candidates as soon as you can. Instead of just assessing them and judging them and evaluating them, consider a softer approach and begin building that relationship right away. When possible, provide a personal experience, such as video interviews or office tours for potential hires, or once they've accepted the offer or thinking about accepting the offer, you can even plan informal gatherings for new hires to get to know their future colleagues. I know when I first started, before I started here at Outmatch, I got to meet my colleagues. We went out for a little happy hour about a month before I even started, and it was a great way to kind of get the onboarding process started and make me feel appreciated. You can also try finding ways to engage with candidates in an authentic way to connect with them on a deeper, more personal level. So remember, candidates are people too, and those same relationship building techniques that help you in other areas are still applicable here. And candidates will really appreciate that you're taking the time to get to know them on a personal level. So in addition to getting to know the candidates, you also want to make sure that the candidates get to know you. One way to do this is to provide a realistic job preview. Candidates who are given a realistic job preview are less likely to leave the organization soon after hire because they know exactly what they're getting into. Providing a realistic job preview lets candidates interview you, get to know the team they'll be working with, get a good get a good understanding of the culture and the work environment, and glimpse into a day in the life of the job. This gives both your organization as well as the candidate a better understanding of how well they fit with the organization and the role. And the transparency of the RJP process really enhances the candidate experience. During the RJP, or whatever that process looks like for you and your organization, just make sure candidates feel comfortable asking the questions that they need to ask. It'll give you insights not only into them, but it will also allow you to understand how well that they're going to fit within the role.
Great, thanks, Chelsea. So the last myth we wanted to kind of debunk today was myth number 3, the candidate experience ends when the offer is signed. Well, I'm sure this is no surprise, but we are here to tell you that is not correct. So what do you do about this, and kind of what do we mean? So when we talk about the candidate experience, what I think a lot of companies don't always take into account is that it continues through their first few days on the job. It's really important that you provide that positive experience from the time the offer letter is signed through those first few days. So what are some ways you can do this? One thing is just celebrate that they received an offer. Often there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of push to ensure that people are excited and know that the candidate knows that they're excited that they're joining the company. So keep that hype going. Connect them to other employees. Connect them back to their interviewers. Let the interviewers know, hey, so-and-so got an offer. Anything you can do to help us seal the deal would be great. Remember all the time and effort you put into getting this person to the offer stage. Don't lose them just because you sort of drop off at the offer letter. I think a lot of companies have the notion that, well, we don't want to bug them. We don't want to put too much pressure on them. But at the end of the day, it's nice to feel wanted. It's nice to feel like, you know, this is a place that wants me and that will be a good fit. And changing jobs is a huge life decision. And so I think that oftentimes it doesn't hurt to let someone know that this is the right decision. Additionally, think about assigning them a buddy, someone who can answer questions and really keep in touch. That doesn't necessarily need to be an HR person. This should ideally be someone who's a colleague or would be a future peer. Things like newsletters or other company happenings is a great thing to share. If you have a company memo that's come out that you feel like you could share, forward that on and just say, hey, I know you don't start for a week or two, but would love for you, just want you to be in the loop as to what's going on in the company. The intent is not to give them work before they start, but hey, just want to keep you in the know. And then finally, encourage them to follow career pages, follow you on Facebook, LinkedIn, what have you. That's just another way to sort of stay in the loop. And oftentimes they're excited to start, and so they're willing to share more sometimes than other employees.
Great, thank you. So I do see, thank you everyone who was commenting, letting us know that we're having some audio issues. So we'll hopefully we've solved those and we're back up and running. But thank you again for letting us know. All right, well, Courtney, I think we're done playing Mythbusters. And now we can go into some tips on how to improve the candidate experience. Let's talk about ways, there's some ways that you can improve there's a lot of ways you can improve the candidate experience, but I think that there's 3 main ones that I'd like to focus on today that are kind of easier fixes than perhaps some of these more detailed ones we've been talking about. The first is to streamline your selection process. Second is to utilize social media, as Courtney just mentioned. And the third is to make sure you're interviewing effectively. So let's take a deep dive. The first step is to streamline your selection process. And by streamline, we mean simplify. I think I hear some talent acquisition managers silently clapping with that one. Your application should be easy. The last thing you want is to deter great candidates because of a laborious initial application. Take a look at your current application process and ask yourself, is it mobile friendly? Can tech-savvy candidates on the go apply for the role at their convenience? What does the application process look like when you're completing it on a mobile device? Is it simple and straightforward? Does it take a short amount of time, or is it taking up a lot of the candidate's time to just apply for the role? Are all of the fields on the application process necessary or relevant? Are some of the fields superfluous? Is there anywhere that you can make the process or the application shorter? So good news if you answered any of those in the negative. You have some easy improvement opportunities to simplify your application process. This will not only make the candidate's life easier, but will also help recruiters by minimizing the information he or she needs to comb through any given candidate, focusing only on what's relevant. Another way to simplify the process is to add a job-specific personality assessment that can tell recruiters if a candidate is a good fit or not for the role. This also helps the candidate from being strung along in the selection process for a role that they might not be good for and they might not even like. If their personality doesn't fit with the requirements of the role or the culture or the environment, they're not going to be happy in that role. And that's when we start seeing not only bad job performance, but also turnover. And if you do have a personality assessment, consider integrating it with your applicant tracking system for an even more streamlined process.
Great, thanks, Chelsea. So the second tip is really to make social media work for you. So one of the first things you can do is just find ways to recruit passively on social media. And so really what this means is there are plenty of job opportunities and other things. So what ways you can kind of think outside the box. So marketing your brand, things like articles, webinars, infographics, those are all ways to sort of share your brand without the now our brand, our new name, everyone on LinkedIn and changed their profiles all at the same time. So they had a company-wide meeting and everyone did it real time. And that was just a great thing because suddenly across the board, everyone's seeing Outmatch pop up and it's like, well, what's going on? Why is everyone changing this? What's happening? Secondly, I think it's important to think about how you can advertise career opportunities. So while you may have career opportunities on your website, how can you phrase those in sort of a more engaging way? Do you have it on Facebook? Do you have it on LinkedIn? Is there something on Instagram? I've even seen companies buy Snapchat geofields, and you can actually have Snapchat filters that advertise your company, especially around conferences or if you've got a big hiring push. There are a lot of creative ways out there that you can really think outside the box. And then the last tip here on social media is find ways to auto-reply to applicants with links to other jobs. So after someone applies, return them or send them to the career site. Suggest other jobs that they may be a fit for in the same industry. Put them on your list to follow up with. I think also during the recruiting process, that's something that hiring managers and recruiting, you can really start to kind of get a passive list of candidates who maybe weren't a fit for this role or dropped out because something changed, but keep them on your list, keep in touch with them, and they may end up to become a great candidate down the road.
Yeah, and something I would like to add to this as well is sometimes it's okay to brag. I know I'm looking at our list of people who are joining us today, and y'all are from some really great companies, and you do great things for your employees. So brag about that on social media. Find ways to celebrate your employees and celebrate the great things that your organization is doing, not only for maybe the community or your clients or your customers, but also for your employees, so that people know that it's a great place to work and they'll want to apply. And again, I apologize if we're having some audio issues. We're trying to work on it. All right, our last tip here is about the art of interviewing, and I do think it is an art, but there is some science behind it as well. Interviews are where meaningful conversations happen and make the most impact on the candidate. Again, not to make those recruiters sad, but the hiring managers have the biggest influence on the candidate and the candidate experience. So it's really important that those hiring managers who are conducting the interviews know what's going on. So here are some tips on how to create a really positive interview experience for candidates? First thing you can do is make sure you have a standardized process. That process needs to happen the exact same way each time so that it's quick. The time from the phone interview or the phone screen to the actual interview happens seamlessly. And the recruiter, the hiring manager, and the candidate know what to expect. You also want to make sure that the candidate's meeting with the right people. So the candidate should be meeting with the people that they're going to be working with every day. Who's on their team? Who are they going to be reporting to? Who are they going to be relying on? And make sure that they have an opportunity to speak with those individuals. Again, so not only that the organization knows that the candidate is a good fit, but that the candidate knows that the organization is a good fit for themselves. And prepare those people that are going to be meeting with the candidate. Share LinkedIn profiles. I know that here at Outmatch, we're really big on sharing LinkedIn profiles so that we get to not only see a face to the name and it feels a little bit more personal, but then we also can kind of get some of that surface level information out and use that time a little bit more wisely when we do get to speak with them. Make sure you train your interviewers not only legal defensibility, but also that they're getting the right information they need. That they can answer some of those questions that the candidate might not feel comfortable asking during the interview.
One other piece I was just going to share, Chelsea, is I think oftentimes thinking about ways that you can sort of streamline your process for interviewing. So what's FAQs that you can share with candidates as they prepare for the interview? Can you share things like parking information, who to ask for, what time to arrive? Also thinking about the interview time that you actually plan for. So if you plan an hour, tell your interviewers to plan for 50 minutes. So not only do they have time to ask questions, but also they have time to get to the next interview. I think oftentimes it doesn't always leave a great message or a great feeling when you're rushing off to end one interview and start the next. Mm-hmm. Keep in mind, candidates are kind of nervous oftentimes when they get there. So the more you can do to kind of make them feel at home, the better. And a lot of times that means not making them feel like they're being rushed off.
Mm-hmm. And Courtney, do you have any experience with video interviews?
Yeah, so I've seen video interviews used in a lot of different ways. One thing that I've seen done really well is when you really put your brand into it. So we've got a client right now that just has a really unique brand in the sense of they're young, but they want people who are outgoing, but yet know the business and really connect with their customers. And so they built a lot of this language kind of in the video interviewing about kind of this is who we are, this is who works well here, tell us why you would be a good fit. And what I found is that the people that then do the video interviewing really showcase that. They feel more comfortable showcasing their personality. They kind of feel like they know what the company is looking for. And they've actually even hired people straight out of the video interview. So without even meeting them in person, because they feel like just based on that, they've really gotten a great idea of what this person has to offer. So yeah, it's a great resource.
Yeah, I think it also is a good resource for companies who maybe trying to be more cost efficient with their interviewing. So instead of having to fly that candidate across the country and interview them in person, a video interview is a really nice way to be able to get a sense of that individual and who they are in person, but not actually having to bear the cost of bringing them in person. So that's another useful tool. All right, we have a bonus tip for you as well.
Yes, we do. Okay, bonus tip. So think outside the box. So just kind of two key questions to ask. So first of all, what makes my organization different than a competitor? We all have competitors in our industry. So I think things you can think about what you have that would make a candidate want to work for you can really be a huge thing to your advantage. So for example, my previous background was in recruiting, and so I often look to other companies to see, okay, what can we do to think outside the box? What are they doing? And one that I always thought was really cool was American Airlines. So when they perhaps, while their offers were always very competitive, one thing to sort of get them over that competitive edge was they'd throw in, a few thousand miles, maybe even 100,000 miles as part of a sort of bonus when you got started. For new hires. And, you think, okay, I work for American Airlines, I can fly for free anywhere. But what you don't always realize is when you fly for free, you may have to fly standby. So having miles to actually cash in on tickets is huge for employees. So it really helped them stand apart. It didn't really cost them much, and yet to a candidate, it made a world of difference. I worked with a lot of folks who were straight out of school, so the idea that they could travel the world for a few weeks before they started their job was huge and really made a huge impact. So thinking kind of outside the box, what you have to offer, I think is really important. And then the second tip, think about what might make someone feel really valued or special. So one example was an Australian tech company that actually sends this personalized gift. So for example, they had a candidate who really enjoyed soccer. They sent them soccer tickets to the next game as just part of the offer to say, we're really excited, go enjoy this. And, I think those are things, it doesn't always have to be, soccer tickets may sound a little bit more expensive, but I think the key is that they learned something about the candidate and they connected to that, right? I've seen companies that have done other things, perhaps they have kids, and so they've sent, fun things for the kids to enjoy. I know we had a candidate one time that was getting ready to go on a vacation, and that had been planned. They were going to the beach, and so he couldn't start for a few weeks. So once he accepted the offer, we sent them kind of beach towels and toys for the kids to take to the beach, just as hey, enjoy your vacation. We'll be here when you get back. Excited to have you start. And it's just those little reminders that suddenly it makes it feel like you're a family. These are people that care about you. It's not just this sort of big company that's sort of cold and doesn't think about you as a person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks. So in summary, Chelsea, I'll let you kind of wrap it up.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I know, let me just give us a quick summation, and then we'll open it up the floor for some questions. So remember that the candidate experience does have a long-term impact on the organization, especially today with social media and technology, and anybody can tweet out anything, and that can really impact your organization's brand and the type of candidates that are going to be applying for your organization. But also, the types of candidates who are going to be accepting those offers really is impacted by the candidate experience. And high volume selection can be personal. Always try to find ways to treat candidates like people. Reach out to them, let them know what those expectations are, give them a thank you for applying. Nurturing the candidate post-hire is certainly important. You don't just want to give them the offer and then wait a month or two before they start and don't get in touch with them at all. There's a lot that you can do to start the onboarding process ahead of time before that first day, and there's a lot that you can do to socialize that individual with their team and their culture. And finally, to improve your candidate experience, start by streamlining the process, using social media, and interviewing more effectively. All right, so that concludes our slides for today. Does anybody have any questions? And if you do, you can go ahead and either tweet at us or use the GoToWebinar
questions box, yeah.
All right, it looks like we have a question here. Courtney, if you don't mind answering this one.
Sure.
How do candidates respond when personality assessments are introduced to the selection process? And does this cause candidate drop-off rates to increase?
Yeah, so great question. So I think a couple things to keep in mind. So first of all, do how do candidates respond to personality assessments? I think the overwhelming answer is very positively. Candidates like the fact that they sort of get another opportunity to showcase their skill set and sort of the things that they bring to the table. So personality assessments, I think, are, they typically can be engaging. People like answering questions kind of about themselves. But furthermore, they feel like it's typically job related. So perhaps they don't have the resume or the work experience to showcase, but if they do well in the assessment, it makes them feel like they have another shot. The second piece of the question, does it cause drop-off? And I think that actually really matters about where the assessment is put in the process. So kind of industry standard for us is about 10% drop-off for our assessments. When you look at assessments that are integrated, that actually drops closer to about 7%. If you actually then add a recruiter reaching out to set expectations, so they actually do a pre-screen and then the assessments and after the fact, that actually drops down to less than 3% drop-off for us. So I think the key is that the more you can set expectations and let candidates know that this is coming and here's what to expect, the better off they'll be and the better experience it provides. So definitely something that can really work to your benefit and would definitely encourage you to look into if you're not already using them.
Great, thank you. All right, one more here. How do you make sure that the candidate experience remains positive when there are issues with their backgrounds during the individualized assessment?
Yes, that's interesting. So the backgrounds, I assume you mean like a background check, may not come back favorably. So I think the key there is approach the issue head on, right? So have the conversation with the candidate, hey, this, unfortunately came up in your background check and, we're not able to proceed. This is our policy. I think that people understand, I guess backing up, really the key is to put your background check at a point where people understand what you're looking for and have an opportunity to perhaps set expectations, right? If you're doing a background check on a criminal record, and someone has a felony charge, for example, they're probably going to not be surprised when you come back to them and say, look, this came up. Unfortunately, we can't move forward. I think the biggest thing to remember is don't just send if you're doing a background check at the very end of the process, don't just send a very sort of one-off email, sort of scripted auto response email that says, sorry, we're not moving forward, and doesn't really give a reason. I think that it's important that the recruiter reaches out and tells the candidate why they're not moving forward.
Yeah, Courtney, that segues really nicely into another question we had here about how do you let candidates down gently without hurting the company's reputation or brand? And I think that, to Courtney's point, the more time and effort you put into letting the candidate down should be correlated with how much time that candidate has spent in the selection process with your organization. So for candidates that have just applied and they're not making it past step one of the selection process, certainly send an email thanking them for their application and probably encouraging them to continue looking at opportunities as quickly as as soon as I cannot stress that enough, as soon as you know that you're not going to be moving forward with a candidate, let them know that they're not being considered further. However, a candidate that's come in for interviews and done assessments and met with the team, you really should find a way to communicate that either, not on the phone if possible, because they have invested a lot in your organization and you should feel like you kind of owe it to them for investing their time and consideration in you guys as much as you have in them.
I think one other piece of that, Chelsea, is recognize that there are different types of turn down emails, right? So you can have a very generic one when someone first applies that, nope, you're not a fit, thanks so much for applying, go back, look on our website for future opportunities. There's also a way to say, you know what, thanks for applying, we're actually really interested, but we don't have anything right now, check back. And that sends a totally different message that, oh, I might be a fit for something down the road. Mm-hmm. And then just to add to Chelsea's point about the phone call, I think that oftentimes companies are nervous, right, to pick up the phone and tell someone, unfortunately, we're not moving forward. But I think the key is stick to the message, but most candidates are appreciative that you're calling.
Yes, absolutely.
Over and above and beyond everything, it just leaves a good impression that, wow, you took the time to call me, even though we're not moving forward, and said that we're not moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
I think be prepared with perhaps feedback. I think a lot of times that's a common practice where candidates want to know, well, what should I have done better? And it's hard, right, when the feedback is, well, you didn't quite have the experience we were looking for. So think about that in advance, I think, of, what's some actionable feedback that they can change, because they can't go and just get another year of experience in the next week, right? But think about, what are some perhaps feedback suggestions you can give to them that, you know what, take a few more years, get a little bit more experience in this industry or this project, and then keep in touch. Like, we definitely thought you were a great fit culturally. It's just not the right thing for this job.
All right, I think that's about all the questions we have time for, except for this final one is, will we be posting this? And yes, we will, and we can also be providing the slides if anybody is interested. Hopefully we'll be able to repair some of the audio so that all of this great content you'll be able to hear and maybe apply to your organization in some way.
Great. Thanks, Chelsea. Awesome. Well, appreciate everyone's time. Again, this will be posted, and everyone have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.